Today is Monday, October 20th, 2025. This is First Alert Weather Plus. Meteorologist Nicholas Snyder here giving you the latest on what you need to know in terms of that weather. And while we don't have a typical active week, there's still plenty to talk about in terms of that weather. So let's get right into it. Worldwide storminess. It's more active around the world, just pretty much everywhere you go. We're going to talk about storms all over the place impacting Alaska, for instance, all the way back home to us in terms of the future and in the past. So more on that in just a second. Cooler temperatures are going to be on the way as well. We're talking more widespread frost to be expected over parts of the region. In fact, by the end of the week, a lot of us could have seen our first frost. We'll get you a look at that long-term forecast here as well. A lot of people are wanting to know what's headed our way and what's to be expected in the long term. Already we've had quite a bit of storms, including one big one that we did see up in Alaska. Meteorologist Tony Cavalier has more on that and what we saw from up there.
The North Pacific Seas churned in an angry whitewash last week. The waters off the Aleutian Island chain living up to their nickname as the cradle of storms in the distant North Ocean. Former Typhoon Hailong had swiped parts of the Asian Orient on its way to a rendezvous with America's last frontier, the state of Alaska, southeast-facing shores of the 50th state, feeling the brunt of the flag-ripping winds. Coast Guard helicopters called to the rescue. The seaside inundation akin to a powerful nor'easter. Residents in Alaska in awe of Mother Nature's wrath.
The house is unlivable. We can't live in there anymore. This is the worst ever. Kipnik is totally wiped out.
It was the first of several autumn storms that Alaskans will have their eyes on before Thanksgiving and winter weather set in.
So it's interesting how weather in the North Pacific can eventually influence the weather in North America. So let's set the stage as we watch this beautiful storm move through the Bering Sea, the Aleutians, up into Alaska, producing the damage that we saw in the video. Again, former Typhoon Hailong, which at its peak was a Category 4 with 140-mile-an-hour winds over toward the Asian continent. But when we watch these storms cross the Pacific, keep in mind it's unusually warm in the North Pacific this time of the year, this year in 2025. And that's important. That'll play a role because remember, the Pacific is the biggest ocean of the world, oceans of the world being covered by 75% water. And the Pacific is basically the gorilla of all oceans in the world, as it encompasses more surface area than the others. So we're interested in big storms in the North Pacific because they ride the jet stream. Did you know there are two jet streams across the world? The one in the northern hemisphere goes from west to east, slinkies its way along. And then in the southern hemisphere, things turn around and the winds blow from east to west. Maybe we'll have another time we can talk about that on First Alert Plus. But right now we want to focus on what's going on this past weekend and this week up into Alaska, where can you see this beautiful leftover remnant of Hailong, the beautiful swirl. We call it a comma cloud in meteorology, and it's an indication of a very energetic storm. And in fact, that energetic storm was able to produce 100-mile-per-hour winds up the Aleutian chain into parts of southern Alaska with coastal inundation. That would be the effect what you would know as a storm surge, and of course the high winds knocking out power to many. What it means for us as we get into the middle and end of the fall season, any leftover typhoon activity in the North Pacific is able to send warm and moist air into Alaska and then dislodge cold air from Canada. Think of a toothpaste. When you squeeze the tube of toothpaste, toothpaste comes jutting out. So this is kind of like a squeeze play going on as the North Pacific is energized. Storm system, warm air, moisture into Alaska helps to dislodge cold air out of the Arctic Ocean area and down into southern Canada and eventually the northern United States. And that can often lead to some mid-October into November frost and even the opportunity for snows across the Great Lakes into the northern plains. So it's all kind of tied in. The typhoon influence, how the North Pacific can lead to fall cold shots. Well, now you know about it. And you've heard about it first here at First Alert Plus with meteorologist Nicholas Snyder.
And thank you, Tony, for that. Yeah, we had quite a bit of cold air move on in. In fact, part of that cold front that came through is because of the warmer air that had moved up into Alaska. So it's quite something to see over much of the region, just what we've seen over the last 24 hours. And again, we even saw some winds of our own here with gusts up to 40 miles an hour in some cases yesterday. So quite a bit of activity indeed. Let's talk about what's going on right now here in our water vapor satellite. Want to highlight this big old wiggle right here. That, in fact, is what came through yesterday. That's our system that came through. You can kind of see the swirl right there. I'll highlight that with our low pressure center right here, centered right over New York now. Right now, we're seeing an area of convergence aloft, confluence even, where you have that sinking motion creating an area of high pressure just to our south and east right here. My apologies for that. That was the wrong icon. Let's get that right icon on there for you. Right there, that high pressure just to our south and east, pumping in some southerly winds. So we did actually warm up in comparison to where we were last night. Some better conditions for sure for a lot of us in the afternoon. But what is headed our way is this next area of low pressure right here. And that's going to drive on in some windier conditions, some breezier conditions, and even some rain shower activity as we head into tomorrow thanks to the increased moisture. You can kind of see the increased moisture based on the coloring right here on our computer. Those whiter clouds indicate that moisture right there. We also see a re-strengthening of this area of low pressure right in here, where you see that driving up into northern Minnesota. That little disturbance right there is what's driving a much stronger area of low pressure to the region, and what will feed into what we do see for your day tomorrow. So let's talk about kind of the future and what can be going on and things of that nature. Our jet stream showing the disturbance tomorrow. It is a little bit weaker compared to where we were yesterday. Yesterday, we saw a very strong disturbance kind of ride the jet stream, move into some warmer air, and really just explode an area of low pressure to the north. Hence why we saw those stronger winds. Now, we're going to see some breezy conditions tomorrow, but this system has a little bit more of a positive tilt to it, meaning it's driven by cold air. It's not necessarily driven by any warm air, which means the system is going to be a little weaker. That's good news for us. We don't want to see any more widespread wind. The one caveat is we don't also want to see a little bit of rain. And unfortunately, we are going to be seeing a little bit of rain. We want to see a lot of rain. I know a lot of those locations still dealing with drought conditions, but this is what's headed our way with this system. Because of that positive tilt, like I mentioned earlier, few things I want you to note. This pressure gradient, those white lines, they're a little bit further apart compared to the system on Sunday. That's that tight pressure gradient. It's still tight enough to drive some breeziness over the area, but it's not going to be strong enough to really allow us to see those really strong winds that we saw on Sunday. So less impactful wind, less impactful rain. It's a drier air mass. It's coming out of Canada as opposed to the Pacific Ocean, which is what we saw yesterday. So not nearly as much rain, less wind. The rain is the bad news. I know, again, a lot of us, especially up toward Webster Springs, up toward Sutton, Somersville, we desperately need that rain. Doesn't look like it's going to be the case. We're still going to see enough rising motion to produce a little bit of rain, but it's a drier air mass. The weaker low, however, is the good news. Breezy, but very low, if any impacts, seen by this system. Only about 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts to be expected. But I mentioned that positive tilt. It's driven by colder air, so we're going to see a much colder air mass behind this low pressure and behind this front. In fact, our highs will be typical of early November for much of the region. So let's track that rain. I mentioned how light it's going to be. Very light round of rain coming around that morning commute to the river cities, Huntington, Ashland, Ironton, kind of up State Route 93 toward the Jackson area, toward MacArthur's, Oleski, even up toward the Athens area, places like that. Moving further to the east, we get a bit of a break toward the afternoon. A few more rounds of rain could try to work their way on in, I think, right after sunset. But if you are going to, let's say, the Autumn Fest Parade, Sarita Canova, you should be dry. It's just going to be a little gusty on you. Mention those winds. Up to 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts could be a possibility. Those, for the good news, don't push down trash cans. They don't bring down Halloween decorations. They don't cause much damage, if any damage. But it will cause a bad hair day. That's pretty much the only impact you're going to see. It's going to be noticeable wind, but it's not going to do anything to really impact your day if you're not going to be outside. So there's some good news for you. And again, that should continue with that next little push of rain during the overnight here as well. So it's something we're watching, but really not overly concerned about here in that forecast. Meteorologist Dylan Godet has a look at your zone-by-zone forecast and what you can expect hour by hour for your day tomorrow.
Hey everyone, First Alert Meteorologist Dylan Godet here with a look ahead at your day on Tuesday. This is the day we're going to see brief chance of some rain showers. It's not going to be raining all day, but that's as a front does push on through the area. We'll range from the upper 60s into the possible low 70s in a few locations. I think low 70s will be tough to reach. It'll also be breezy. Best chance of rain midday from really Huntington eastward. That's going to be your best shot at sneaking in any precipitation. And again, warmest day of the week, and we're only hitting the upper 60s and low 70s. So quite a change in our weather pattern. This weather pattern is going to stick with us all week as we're going to be talking about cool afternoons, particularly on Wednesday, and possibly even some widespread frost by Friday morning. You can stay with the First Alert Weather team for more updates.
Yeah, and Dylan mentioned those cooler afternoons. That's something we are certainly keeping a very, very close eye on in the long term of this week, at least. The midterm forecast, but in the long term in terms of this week. So let's get back right into it. Let's dive into what we could be expecting a little bit longer. So I mentioned this system coming through. There it is on Tuesday. Notice one thing here. I want you to notice the cooler conditions that remain overhead. Those lower heights, we talk about lower heights meaning cooler conditions. This big center of low pressure, that's what this is. It also means lower heights, lower geopotential heights. The air is less thick. Cold air is less thick. So that's what we're talking about right here is just this bowling ball of, for lack of a better term, just colder air overhead. The warmer air, meanwhile, bottled well back to the west. So we're talking warmer air out toward the high plains, out into the eastern Rockies, the Front Range, Colorado, parts of New Mexico and Arizona. Meanwhile, this colder air continues to funnel its way on into the region right here and drive in some interesting conditions, to say the least. In fact, we could be seeing overnight lows reach the mid-30s over widespread spots, with highs barely reaching into the 50s. And it really doesn't change until we head into the weekend. Now, we're watching this next system down here. This is another little disturbance that could try to work its way on in, but there's a lot of drier air kind of over our neck of the woods right here. We do remain dry for much of the first half of the weekend, but parts of Saturday, maybe a few locations west of US 23 could see an isolated shower. The American model kind of showing the same deal. Notice how that colder air just wants to remain in place right in here. That area of low pressure does not want to move for quite a bit. So we're going to be trapped in temperatures that are going to feel like early November. Again, middle and upper 50s, lower 60s for a lot of us, maybe even a few lake effect showers in some of the higher elevations out toward Nicholas County, out toward Fayette County, just outside of our viewing area. You're talking Webster County, up toward the Elkins area as well. Yeah, it's certainly a possibility to see a few of those showers driven by that lake moisture with northwesterly winds over the area. So a winter-like pattern for sure, even though those temperatures are still going to be near 60. And we don't get out of it until we head toward the middle part of the weekend. And then we'll watch this next disturbance again, try to bring in some rain, but also a push of some warmer air. Notice how this warmer air kind of works its way a little bit further to the east, and that could try to nudge up into our area. Meanwhile, after that, this is a system we're going to have to be watching too. And we'll talk more about that here in the long-term forecast. So let's get right into that cooler air. Again, this is our upper air temperatures. This is a good measure of how cold an air mass really is. We use this to measure the polar vortex, to really measure winter weather, or even heat waves on the opposite end of the spectrum. Notice this is sub-freezing air, and I know this isn't quite at the surface, so it's going to be a little bit cooler. But this is very, very cold air, sub-freezing air, in fact, working its way on in for Friday morning. Thursday night and Friday morning, especially when we see those clear skies, going to be very cold. American model agreeing with the European model in terms of this, although it's a little bit less amplified. You'll see, again, that core of colder air, sub-freezing temperatures, likely just above the Earth's surface, which means we could be talking about temperatures into the upper 20s, lower and middle 30s in spots for overnight lows Thursday night into Friday morning. In fact, here's a forecast from the National Weather Service. This is 8 a.m. Friday. Huntington, 36 degrees. Charleston, 36 degrees. Portsmouth, 34. Gallipolis, 34. 29 Paintsville. Remember, this is just a forecast, but certainly going to be a possibility to see those temperatures reach that low in some rural spots. If we tuned in last week, we talked about frost and what the temperatures required were for frost. Hannah Hayes did a very great demonstration on that. Temperatures like these definitely are frost producers, and it will definitely be something we will have to watch in terms of our widespread frost. Pretty much, if you haven't seen your first frost yet, you're likely to see it either Wednesday night into Thursday or Thursday night into Friday. And so what that means for us, cover the plants, get the ice scrapers ready, things like that. Those plants can survive frost as long as they're covered. Hard freeze is where you're talking about those overnight lows reaching the middle and upper 20s. And I don't think we're going to see that by any means. No freezes, but certainly a widespread frost can cause some damage to the plants if they're not covered. So cover those plants up. They will be fine if you want them to last a little bit longer into the fall. Now, if we see persistent overnight lows like this, if we see lows get into the upper 20s, that's where you're going to be having to talk about hard freezes and things of that nature. Now, I mentioned the precipitation associated with this. Let's talk about tomorrow's system. Notice the lack of precipitation that is over the area. In fact, most of the moisture is further to the south. The green means moisture conditions in the atmosphere, and where you don't see any contour is where it's dry. We're seeing dry conditions. Again, this air mass that's coming in with this system tomorrow came out of Canada. It's not coming from the Pacific Ocean like we saw Sunday, so rain's going to be less widespread. I did show you the future cast where we did see a few showers, and certainly a few showers are going to be a possibility tomorrow here or there, but no widespread rain, no widespread soaking rain coming, in fact, until we head really into the weekend, and even that is going to be hard to come by because most of the moisture is still out here into the Mississippi Valley, St. Louis, down toward Jonesboro, Arkansas, Memphis, Tennessee, down into the Mississippi Delta, and into New Orleans. We, meanwhile, stay in a fairly dry pattern. While there is a bit more moisture trying to come in, the dryness does continue. And really, if you're along and east of this line I'm about to draw, which you'll see right here, if you're along and east of this line I'm about to draw right here, you're pretty much going to stay dry all weekend. So if you're looking for any widespread rain, again, it's going to be hard to come by. And that's our extreme drought zone right there in central West Virginia. So it is unfortunate, yes. The American model very much in agreement with what the European model is saying here, without really any good moisture until the weekend. So we're staying dry through the weekend, other than a few of those showers that could be coming through if you're along and east of this line right here. Really, the only location seeing a good chance of rain for the weekend will be along and west of US 23. So if you're out toward Grayson, if you're out toward Moorhead, Vanceburg, even toward the Portsmouth area, Raritan, Otway, up toward Waverly and Piketon, pretty solid chance you could see a shower on Saturday or Sunday. Of course, everyone has a solid chance of us seeing at least a sprinkle tomorrow. It's not going to be a widespread rain, but a sprinkle could be a possibility. But widespread soaking rain is not really going to be the case anytime soon. Unfortunately, if you're looking for that drought buster, it is still not coming. But there are more chances of rain compared to where we had been. Of course, we've seen just long dry periods where it's just been sunny, where we haven't seen any sort of chances of rain. And meteorologist Hannah Hayes is explaining why we're seeing more of those chances of rain compared to those dry conditions that we had seen for much of early October and much of September as well.
Well, over the next week, we'll see just a bit more rainfall than we did the week before. There are a couple reasons for that. Going back to Sunday, for example, that cold front came through and gave us some on and off rain chances throughout the day and the gusty winds. Now, you hear us say it all the time. A cold front's coming and headed this way, so be prepared for some rain chances. But why are cold fronts associated with the rain? When the dense, colder air that is coming in is pushed towards the warmer air, it causes the warm air to rise pretty fast, and that cools it off, and then it condenses into clouds and eventually into rain. That's why after a cold front, the clouds clear out and we get a lot of sunshine leading to beautiful days. Now through Tuesday and Wednesday, similar patterns going to take place to what we saw on Sunday. We've been tracking out this cold front since Sunday that will make its way into the region. That'll give us another chance of rain. The cold front coming in along with the upper level fronts are found in the vicinity of a stronger jet stream. As they tilt towards the colder air, you can see that here. The front passes with help from the jet stream that will give us the rain chances and the cooler temperatures that are often associated with the cold front. This is why we have a few days worth of the rain chances this week. After the association with the upper level jet passes, we are clearing out for the week. So all this week, there aren't entirely extremely high rain chances for everyone across the region, but we're going to see a more wet pattern because of the association with the front we have coming in and the upper level jet pushing them into our region.
Yeah, and that upper level jet, like Hannah mentioned, going to be a lot more active over the coming days and really the coming weeks, thanks to that sun, or at least our part of the sun, tilting itself away from our part of the Earth tilting itself away from the sun and giving us more of that cooler air kind of filtering in from the poles and things of that nature. So let's get back to our graphics and I'll kind of show you what the jet stream is going to be up to. Again, we mentioned that weekend system. It's going to be fairly broad, fairly weak, not expecting a whole lot to move on in. But then we track this little system right in here. This is going to be a big player as we head into next week. As we see this big area of strong flow aloft, especially this one little bullseye I circled right here. I'll clear that off and I'll just draw the bullseye right in here. This is the European model, by the way. This is North Texas, South Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle. This is going to travel up our direction, or at least try to, into this warmer zone of air. Remember, this is the warm air when you see that jet stream well off to our north. So we're going to see this warmer air filter in by the time we head into Monday. But what this is going to do is allow this guy that is in North Texas into Oklahoma, this system that you see right in here, which is already negatively tilted, meaning it's got a lot of gumption to it for sure. It's being driven by warm air and cold air, kind of pushing in some stronger winds, a stronger area of low pressure, and a really strong system overall. You'll watch it as it moves further up to the north and east once we head into next week. And then it becomes cut off. When you get cut off systems, they don't like to move a whole lot. They like to stay stationary. And so all of next week into this cooler air, once again, we're going to be in a colder pattern. It's going to filter in some moisture, so some more rain headed our way. That's good news. But also, again, this colder air filtering in, allowing the region to really see likely the coldest air of the season once again next week. We could be talking about highs in the 50s by the time we go into next week. American model showing a similar solution. It is a bit further to the west than the European model, and that's thanks to what it's doing with our system that is coming tomorrow. This guy right here cutting this off as well. So that would mean more warm air surging up this way, pushing this guy further back to the west and allowing more moisture kind of into the Midwest. We'll ultimately see what happens. What both models are saying, though, is that, yes, this system right here is going to become cut off from the overall jet stream that's right in here, and that is going to provide parts of the continental United States with some cooler air and maybe some much-needed precipitation over parts of the region here as well. And as we move forward, it does get closer once we head into the end of the week here, and that's going to help things. Meanwhile, if this American model run comes true, the next thing we'll have to watch is this system back here and then another system back here. And when you get that Pacific jet, this is very typical of La Nina years. We're in a La Nina now. You see where the storm track is concerned, and that could be a signal for a very active winter. Now, active meaning stormy, not necessarily meaning very snowy. It depends on where the storm tracks, but certainly a lot more precipitation could be headed our way this winter if this pattern holds true. Let's take a look at our overall wide-scale pattern here. I want you to notice this is what we're seeing for much of this week. The reason we're seeing this cold air, you heard Tony mention this earlier. The cold air is now back into Alaska, but another push of warmer air is right here up into the North Atlantic. We call this a positive North Atlantic oscillation here, rather a negative North Atlantic oscillation. So what this is doing, this warm air surging up here is pushing any colder air that would be located in parts of the Hudson Bay, down into our region. Like Tony mentioned, the toothpaste, it's squeezing out some of that colder air, pushing it down our way. That's what we're seeing midweek with the potential of that frost Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. As we move this forward, we'll go into next week. You see that cold air retreat. That North Atlantic oscillation goes back to positive. Meanwhile, our Eastern Pacific oscillation, you heard me talk about this before, this stays positive. That cold air wants to stay in Alaska. And meanwhile, the Arctic is bottled up here with cold air. So that polar vortex strong, and this warm air especially is allowed to filter in because of that once we head into Monday. The next player will be whatever this does right here. This system, like I mentioned earlier on the European model, that was out toward Colorado, Wyoming, into the Rockies. If this model holds true, we start to see that North Atlantic oscillation begin to go negative. You see that warmer air pushing in toward the North Atlantic, toward Greenland up here. The only players that would have me a little skeptical of this is our Eastern Pacific oscillations remaining positive. You want that warm air pushing up into Alaska to help filter that down here. And our Arctic oscillation, all up here, still very positive. Still a very strong polar vortex here. So this won't have a whole lot of gumption to it, at least a very strong cold air, but certainly, again, could bring those 50s and could bring overnight lows into the 30s here. Closer look at that pattern again. We get cold toward the end of the week, much warmer air headed our way once we head into Monday of next week, and then we'll watch what this system does here. If it does move toward the east, that's where we'll have to watch for the potential of, again, those highs in the 50s and those overnight lows reaching into the middle and lower 30s. Again, no hard freezes to be expected anytime soon. In the short to mid-term forecast, and this is thanks to what's headed our way toward Monday, again, this is Sunday through about Wednesday next week, you'll notice warmer than normal temperatures, and that's because of that warm condition that's headed our way for Monday ahead of the next system. But a lot more precipitation due to these systems kind of coming in one after another. Typical La Nina pattern is when we start to see a lot more of this precipitation. And another thing, too, is when the south, as you'll notice here, starts to get drier. And that's very typical of La Nina winters, like I said earlier. So let's get into the Super 7-day forecast. A lot of us want to see what's going on there. I'll take myself off the screen so you can see. Temperatures tomorrow near 70. That's thanks to a little bit of southerly wind out ahead of the low pressure, but that cold front does bring in some gusty winds. Like I talked about, up to 25 miles an hour, certainly a possibility, especially in the afternoon here. Just watch the hair. Really not going to be a huge deal in terms of Halloween decorations or the porch furniture or the trash cans, anything like that blowing down. Wednesday, meanwhile, chance of high elevation showers. This is where that lake effect rain comes into gear with the northwesterly winds sloping up the mountains, squeezing out those showers. Sutton, Summersville, let me pull on the mouse here. Sutton, Summersville, Fayetteville all have shots at seeing some showers on Wednesday, especially during the morning time frame. Worth watching for sure. And then once we head to the afternoon, things should start to quiet down. Meanwhile, Friday, it is going to be a very cold morning. I showed you this graphic before. Those temperatures into the upper 20s, lower and middle 30s for a lot of us. Widespread frost. Be sure to cover up the sensitive plants and make sure they survive, because we want your yards to look pretty here on First Alert Plus all the way through Thanksgiving, hopefully, unless we get that hard freeze, in which case, those plants will not make it through that hard freeze for sure. This is First Alert Weather Plus. We give you the first alert to everything you need to know in terms of that weather. We're talking about that long-term pattern, how it looks a little bit cooler compared to the shorter-term forecast up to next week. So we'll keep you updated on how that evolves. It is fall, so things could change at the drop of a hat. We had quite a system yesterday. More systems coming tomorrow. More gusty winds could be a possibility, so be sure to stay updated. WSAZ First Alert Weather Plus on YouTube, a good resource for that if you want to watch that. Be sure to like and subscribe there and follow us on Facebook. I'm meteorologist Nicholas Snyder on Facebook. Dylan is Dylan Goday Weather on Facebook. Tony's Tony Cavalier on Facebook. And Hannah is meteorologist Hannah Hayes on Facebook. And again, if you missed this episode, you could just go to WSAZ.com, find the First Alert Weather Plus tab. You'll see all this and more, including old episodes, right in that tab, and you can watch as you please back there. And again, the YouTube channel, First Alert Weather Plus, WSAZ, First Alert Weather Plus, that is. Be sure to like and subscribe to that. We do exclusive content there as well. In the meantime, I'm meteorologist Nicholas Snyder. Make it a great Monday.